Our encounter with the 14th Colossus takes place in an abandoned city. This is Cenobia, and it's a really strange sort of Colossus. Again, it's one of the smallest we've seen. It's, in supplementary material at least, associated with the image of a lion. I admit I'm a little distracted here because I tried to do another fight against this, and the boss here can actually get you caught in an infinite loop where there's nothing you can do. So I'm a little frustrated because that happened. Here we just need to get its attention so that it begins to smash through some of the architecture here. This is one of the few colossi that actually destroys the world around it, and that's key to the puzzle of what's going on. Barba did that as well, but it wasn't really key to the puzzle. When we talked about the connection to Barba in the last section, it's just because Dorman says that both Barba and Cenobia lust for destruction. Seno, by the way, is a prefix that can just mean new, but it can also mean common. In that case, I like to associate the name common here with the notion of the city. Maybe city commons, even though there's an entirely different term for that. I will say that in this boss fight, I'm definitely more concerned with the space than I am with the boss itself. And here I'm probably going to fall. Or even jump too far. You actually have control over Wander in certain cutscenes. The game's not entirely consistent about it, so sometimes you can jump while you're in a supposed cutscene, and in other cases you can't. There's very few cases of real inconsistency in the game, and that's one of them. In terms of purely what's going on here on a gameplay level, I do enjoy this boss. It's sort of an extended platforming sequence, even though jumping around the colossi and navigating the space has been platforming all along. But here it's really explicit. You have to do a lot of navigation. The battle isn't even really against the Colossus, it's more against the architecture in the land, seeing if that you can navigate it properly. That's even why right here, the Colossus sort of gets distracted. You have to keep it focused on you. So the challenge is really making sure that it attacks, and then making sure that you can handle the motion of what's going on. So even here, I might be able to jump off and land on the next pillar, but that's not an assured thing. I like the fact that that option exists, but it's also sort of annoying that it's so hard to pull off. Throughout this playthrough, we've had moments where we really enjoy sort of messing around with the sort of architecture of the space or the physical geography of the colossi as individual items that we can navigate. In this case, it's a little trickier. I enjoy the fact that we're dealing with a Colossus that destroys the land, even though it's one of the smallest colossi in the game. And I do really enjoy the fact that it gives the entire fight a really strong feeling of grandeur. Still, this is one of the more problematic colossi. Not only because of that infinite loop that I'm talking about, but because of how limited its attention span is. There's a way to skip all of these steps, but it involves doing a very strange jump off the Colossus's back, and even though I enjoy doing some tricky strategies from time to time, I really don't understand how that skip works. I'm definitely distracted fighting this Colossus, not just because of all the things that are happening to the architecture, but just because I'm really concerned with that sort of gameplay flaw of getting caught in that loop where I can die. Even with my health bar so large, there's nothing I can do if I get caught. There aren't very many cases in the game where the gameplay runs into such really egregious problems. Every now and then, the Colossi won't do what you want them to, and it can be a pain when you're really trying to manipulate their actions, but most of the time, the actual programming of the game and the rules of what's going on are generally fair. Even if your character is sort of weak and fragile, you gain a certain control. Even right there, I was able to jump and land on a platform from the falling pillar. In this case, however, this boss fight can show off some of the more unfortunate parts of Shadow of the Colossus' gameplay. In fact, I'm so concerned with what's going on here in terms of gameplay, I'm not really talking about meaning making or anything right now. I want to be concerned with this space, I want to understand what this city is, and I would like to examine it in a more peaceful setting. I really think this game should have offered a mode where you could just explore the space without any of the colossi existing. You can go to certain areas while you're not assigned to certain colossi, but even then you sort of don't get as much freedom to really explore the space, or at least I don't think there is. A sort of passive mode where you don't have to worry about what's going on would be nice. Certainly, people will argue that that's what happens in the game when you don't pursue your objective, but I'm not sure I agree. And here's the problem, and I hopefully won't get caught in it. You'll see that when Wander gets knocked down, it takes a long time for him to get back up. So in this case, I need to move really quickly, because if I get knocked down, well, it's just going to make me really not be able to jump up to where I need to go. Even right here, I'm having some trouble. I was afraid I was going to get knocked down. This whole boss encounter is a little weak. Not in the same way that Bozzaron was, that's just some problems with the game reading what's going on. Here, it's actually the design of the creature, the speed of what's going on. And it's honestly very rare that there's an encounter in this game that I can sit back and say that I sort of hate. I really don't like what's going on here. Even right now, see, this is a cutscene I don't have control over, so I can't really figure out where my position is. I can see myself in the space, but I just recently had a cutscene where I could control myself. Nothing's consistent in this section, and it really bothers me. Hopefully we can make a quick jump to the back. But once again, we're going to be battling the camera. And here, it's scary because if I move down into that space, I really risk getting caught in a very dangerous position. If I stay here, the Colossus will actually destroy these blocks, so I want to try and jump, and luckily I made it. Although, I don't think I did. It looked like I did for a moment. That's another problem with this Colossus. Like I said, nothing seems particularly consistent. It seems like there's a weak spot I could jump on, but it didn't quite work. But knocking it into that pillar does knock it onto the ground and sort of stun it. So, luckily, finishing off this Colossus is not going to be as difficult once we get on its back. In general, though, if there's a section of the game that I think is the weakest, it's actually this, which is a shame because the last two Colossi are really impressive. Once again, it's just a matter of holding on to the right spot. There are certain sweet spots where you can always stab, and the issue is just finding where they are on the body. Although right here, getting knocked off certainly did me no favors. Like I said, there's no particular consistency to what's going on in the body language or the rules of what's happening with this Colossi. I'm sort of at a severe disadvantage. I want this to be a smooth encounter, but really, it's just not going very well. At least with the Phalanx fight, we had some pressure exerted by outside forces. Here, it's just mechanics that are sort of going haywire. A boss design that isn't completely working. Thankfully, though, our next Colossus will be a lot more interesting. In our last two Colossi, we're going to move back into humanoid creatures. And they have a very real sense of dread. And now we have almost no space around Wander. All of that physical proximity is taken away. Whereas we've talked about physical proximity as this thing that can be very intimate, such as Wander touching Mono or spending time on aggro riding, we still have this image that's unsettling, both on the level of having no real space, and then also once we consider that the Colossi finally seem alive. These are points I've talked about before, but I feel they bear repeating. We're very close to the end, though. The next Colossi will be the end of this session, and we'll wait a couple of days before we go into the final section of the game, because the ending is going to do some very strange but very important things, both in terms of gameplay and in terms of narrative. And so, with Colossus 13 and 14, we've had a little bit of a trial. This second section of the game can have things that are both very beautiful and exciting and fun, but also things that sort of don't work on the level that you would expect them to. Still, I definitely like it more than the first half of the game. It feels more alive. Everything else in the first part of the game felt a little bit more perfunctory. Here we have to establish a certain mastery over the space and over the Colossi we face that wasn't particularly present in the first half of the game. That's the end of this section, and boy am I glad that boss fight is over. We'll move on to the next, which I think is very exciting. I hope to see you there.